Okay, right. Morning, everyone. Thank you very much for coming out today. We're going to be trying to make sense of the devil. The Bible talks about the devil, and it sounds like when you read about the devil, that the devil is a supernatural being, and the devil is causing all sorts of havoc in the world. The devil creates evil. The devil creates temptations. The devil also has legions of demons, and these demons get inside people's minds and cause all sorts of issues. The devil brings pain, sickness, general sin and wickedness in the world. And the Bible does very much sound like there is a real supernatural being. Now, I had a look on Wikipedia, which is, I think, have you all heard of Wikipedia? Yeah. So you can go, it's a big encyclopedia. And I've typed in devil, and it came up with devil in Christianity. And it says in Christianity, so Christians, it says in Christianity, the devil is the personification of evil. He is traditionally held to have rebelled against God in an attempt to become equal to God himself. He is depicted as a fallen angel who was expelled from heaven at the beginning of time before God created the material world, and is in constant opposition to God. And when I've looked at it, most Christian religions, in fact, pretty much every Christian religion, believes this is the case, that the devil is a fallen angel who rebelled against God at the beginning of time before creation, and he is in direct opposition to God and is causing evil everywhere. In fact, only a few years ago, the Pope, the head of the Catholic religion, which is the largest Christian religion in the entire world, with over 1 billion followers, the Pope says the devil is a real threat to Christian life, not a myth, the Pope says. In his new exhortation, which was called Rejoice and Be Glad, interestingly, released by the Vatican on April the 9th, 2018, the Pope urged Christians not to think of the devil as an intangible construct, but rather a personal being who assails us. We should not think of the devil as a myth, a representation, as anything symbolic, a figure of speech, or an idea, the Pope wrote. This mistake would leave us to let down our guard and to grow careless and end up more vulnerable. So the Pope says the devil is 100% a real living being that's a problem to you and to me. And when you look at it more, the devil is doing all this stuff and a lot more besides. All evil is coming from the devil. Your own, let's call them evil or sinful thoughts, it's all the devil that's doing it. Which sort of does beg a question in my mind. If the devil is a supernatural being, I don't think any Christian would say that he is more powerful than God, would you? Is anything more powerful than God? Which then begs the question, if there is a supernatural being that may or may not look like it's depicted, why doesn't God just get rid of him? Do you think God has got the power to get rid of the devil? Anybody doubt that God has got the power to do that? God is all powerful. And if there is this being that is literally causing all the evil and sin in the world, why doesn't God just say, I'm just going to get rid of that for you, and then the world will be all fine? Why does he let this devil get away with it? Why is he letting legions of demons into people's hearts and minds and create sickness and horribleness? That needs to be answered. And you might even ask yourself, and I'm not going to answer this now, how was it that in any way an angel that was beautiful and perfect in God's presence ever decided or could rebel against God in the first place and then become this demon of hell and fire and wickedness, causing worldwide havoc? Why didn't God just shut it down and stop it? And you know something? I'll give you the answer to that on the very last slide. So, what we're going to do, we're going to go and have a look in the Bible, and we're going to see what the Bible says about the devil. Is that fair enough? Because we can't do anything else. I don't think we should go and listen to the Pope or, in fact, any other religious leader. All we can do is say, God, what are you telling me about this subject? Is that fair enough? So I started researching the devil in the Bible. So I type in the devil in, because nowadays it's great. There's a computer and you can have Bible software program in front of you and you can type in some words and it searches instantly. Richard's got, look, there is a demonstration of a very ancient computer. It's almost unbelievable that still works, but it does. So you can type in to your computer the devil. So it goes searching instantly, doesn't it? Now, guess how many times in the Old Testament the devil as words appear in the Old Testament? Anybody want to guess? In the Old Testament, how many times does the devil appear? No. The answer is none. Janet gets a prize. Gets a chocolate. Yeah, which is a signed copy of the devil later. Anyway. So look, not a single solitary time does the devil as a word appear in the Old Testament. Not once. So the Old Testament, now that's quite odd when you think about it, because if the devil existed at the beginning, and if the devil has been a long-term problem for the entire planet from the start, one would imagine that the Old Testament would be full of talk about the devil. It's your number one problem. The Pope says he's our number one problem. And yet there's not a single solitary mention of the devil in any part of the Old Testament, which sort of raises a bit of a question. Okay, what about the New Testament? How many times, because it does appear, right, in the New Testament. So how many times is the devil mentioned in the New Testament, would you think? 50 is a good guess, but it isn't the right answer. It's less than 50. And the answer is 35 times in the New Testament. And we're going to look at some of those in just a minute. But here we have the world's number one problem mentioned never in the Old Testament and just 35 times in the New Testament. And I'm going to show you something mind-blowing about this in just a minute. So right from the beginning, Christianity as a whole says the devil existed, right from Genesis all the way through to now. The devil's still full-time busy and is still messing things up in a big way. What I normally do in a talk is I go back to the first time that a word is used in the Bible and we build it out from there. But I'm going to do it in reverse today. I'm going to show you the end at the beginning of the talk. Do you want to know what's going to happen to the devil? Would you like to see what's going to happen to the devil? We're going to have a look. Because the Bible tells us what is the future of the devil. Oh, good. Show me what the future of the devil is. But which book, by the way, do you think it might tell us what the end is of the devil? Where do you think it might be? The answer's on the screen. It's Revelation. Here it is. This is the end of the devil, by the way. In Revelation chapter 20, verse 10, it says, the devil that deceived them was cast into the lake of fire and brimstone, where the beast and the false prophet are, and they shall be tormented day and night forever and ever. Oh, okay. So the Bible says, God says, through his prophet John, which was through Jesus, that the devil is going to be cast into the lake of fire where the beast and the false prophet are. That's the end, I presume, because he's never mentioned again. You sort of do wonder, doesn't sound much of a punishment for the devil, because every picture I see of the devil, he's surrounded by fire. But now the devil is punishment, it sounds like. He's thrown into the lake of fire. And, well, here's another thing, of course. It says that there's two other things already there in this lake of fire. There's something called a beast, and there's something called a false prophet. Well, who are these other people that have managed to get into this lake of fire? You notice it says that the devil is thrown into the lake of fire where the beast and the false prophet are. So there's already two things, people, creatures, in the lake of fire. The devil's joining them at this point. And in fact, it doesn't end there, because a few verses later, in Revelation chapter 20, verse 14, 4 verses on, there's some other things that are thrown into the lake of fire. One is death and the other is hell. It says death and hell were cast into the lake of fire. So what we've now got is a list of 5 things that have been thrown into the lake of fire at the very end of things. We've got a beast, or the beast. We've got the false prophet. We've got the devil. We've got death, and we've got hell. And a whole lot of them are thrown into a lake of fire. And the multi-million-dollar question is, well, who are these other things that are joining the devil? What on earth is the beast? Who on earth is the false prophet? Death and hell, how are they ever thrown into a lake of fire? And what's this all about? And the devil's in amongst it. Right, so I'm going to show you about the beast. Do you want to see the beast? We want to see the beast. Where do you think we might go to find out about the beast? Anybody know where we need to go to read about the beast? Revelation. So if you go back just a couple of books, a couple of chapters, sorry, to Revelation chapter 17, we read about the beast. And here's the beast. It's Revelation chapter 17, verse 3. And it says in Revelation 17, verse 3, so he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness, and I saw a woman sit upon a scarlet-colored beast, full of names of blasphemy, and it's got 7 heads and 10 horns. So in Revelation 17, there's a beast, and it's bright red, it's scarlet, and it's got 7 heads and 10 horns. This is the beast, clearly, that's been thrown into the lake of fire, because it's the last time a beast is mentioned. Now, does anybody think somewhere on planet Earth, there is a real beast that's bright red, that's got 7 heads and 10 horns. Please raise your hand if you think there is a real beast that's got 7 heads and 10 horns that's bright red. Any takers? Well, if it isn't real, what do you think this is? Figurative. What's another word for figurative?
Allegorical.
Allegorical, symbolic. This isn't a real creature, is it? Revelation is telling us about something that isn't like a real creature. It's symbolic of something else. Do you know how I categorically can prove that this is not a real creature? Because guess what? Revelation 17 tells me it's not real. It says in Revelation 17, verse 12, that the 10 horns that you saw aren't real horns. They represent 10 kings who have not yet received a kingdom, but for 1 hour will receive authority as kings with the beast. So the horns on the beast are representing what? Kings. Or what might we say nowadays? We don't have many. I know we got rulers. They represent national rulers. They're not real horns, are they? They represent national rulers. And what you find is when you read Revelation 17, that there's 10 nations that come together. And when they come together, it's like they formed a beast. It's like they formed an empire. The whole beast isn't a real beast. It's symbolic of real kingdoms coming together and forming a great, well, God calls it a beast, but really it's like a big empire. They've all come together. They've given their power and strength to this thing that they've created, but it isn't a real beast. Are we all happy that it's not a real beast? Yeah. Good. So the beast is symbolic of nations. Well, what about the false prophet? Are we expecting a literal human being that's a false prophet to be thrown in with the symbolic beast? Well, guess where we need to go to read about the false prophet? Anybody guess where you might read about the false prophet? Revelation. Just a few chapters before, now this is going to look a little bit odd because this is, well, have a look. Here's what it says. This is Revelation chapter 16, verse 13. It says, I saw 3 unclean spirits like frogs come out of the mouth of the dragon, out of the mouth of the beast, or there it is again, and out of the mouth of the false prophet. So here we go. I'm going to put on the screen what this looks like. You've got a dragon, you've got a beast, and you've got that's what I've put that up there because to me that looks like a false prophet. I don't know if he is or not, but do you know what I mean? That's probably, let's call him a false prophet. And what, by the way, is coming out of their mouths? Frogs. So you've got a frog that comes out the mouth of the dragon. You've got a frog that comes out of the mouth of the beast. And you've got, wait for this. You've got a frog that comes out the mouth of the false prophet, right? Do you think, by the way, it's a real frog, a real dragon? Do you think the dragon might be symbolic? Do you think the beast is symbolic? Do you think the frogs are real, or do you think they're symbolic? Exactly. It doesn't even say they're real, does it? By the way, when it says unclean spirits, it means false teaching. So it's false teachings that are actually like frogs. Do you think the false prophet is a real human being, or do you think he is symbolic of something? Symbolic is the answer. What do you think the false prophet might be symbolic of? False something. False teaching. But what type? Because he's a prophet, so he's false what might it be? False doctrine or false prophecy? Religion. The false prophet is false teachings, it's false religion. So what we've now found out is that the beast is symbolic of nations. And in fact, we find in Revelation 17 that those nations fight against Jesus. We find that the false prophet is to do with false religion. It's symbolic of false religion. They're all thrown into the lake of fire. What's that? We'll leave the devil just for a minute. What about death? Right, here's death. This is the only picture I could find of death. How do you throw death into a lake of fire? I mean, death isn't a thing, is it? I mean, do you take somebody that's dead and throw the dead person in? But that isn't throwing death in, that's throwing a corpse in. Death isn't a real thing. But somehow or other, God says, I'm going to get hold of death and I'm going to throw it in the lake of fire. Do you think that might be symbolic? What this is symbolic of is death coming to an end. When God says, I'm going to throw death into the lake of fire, he is destroying death. And by the way, if you destroy death, what are you left with? Life. So what God is saying in symbolic terms is that when death is thrown in the lake of fire, you've then only got life. And if you've only got life, then you've got immortality. Hell, well, this is interesting because, of course, people think the devil lives in hell. But the word hell is the Greek word Hades, which in the Greek literally means, anybody know what it literally means?
Right. Yeah.
The grave. It's exactly what it means. In fact, in 1 Corinthians 15, verse 55, the exact same word is translated as grave. O death, where is thy sting? O grave, Hades, where is thy victory? Where's the victory? So we come back to this. How does God chuck graves in a lake of fire? I mean, what good's that doing to anybody? But do you think it might be symbolic? It's symbolic of there's no more people entering graves. There's no more death. There is no more people dying. That's exactly what it's about. So what you've got here at the end of Revelation are the nations that reject Jesus are all coming to an end. False religion is all coming to an end. Death is coming to an end. And people dying is coming to an end. Is that a fair summary? And in amongst all of that, you've got this, which 99% of Christianity says, is like the Pope we just read, this is real. But what I'm saying to you, why would something be real in amongst everything that's symbolic? Do you see that? That needs a heck of a big answer, does it not? You see, the other thing as well, do you honestly think there's a real lake of fire where a symbolic beast is thrown in, where a symbolic religion is thrown in, where symbolic death is thrown in? And so there's a real lake of fire, but all these symbolic things are thrown into something that's real. It doesn't make any sense, does it? Do you think the lake of fire itself is symbolic? I think so. What do you think the lake of fire might be symbolic of? Utter destruction, coming to a complete end. And in amongst it is the devil. And what I'm going to show you is, this is how I see it. The devil sounds very real when you read in the New Testament, and it's almost as if at the very end of the story, which has convinced many, many, many people that the devil is real, God suddenly goes, da, 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 da. The devil is symbolic. You don't have to worry. You don't have to worry that it's a real creature coming out to get you. Look, I'm showing you he's symbolic. So go back and look at it again and see him as symbolic, and then you will unpick the truth of what the devil is. You're not being attacked by a third-party supernatural nasty who's going to bring your life into misery. So let's, in the last few minutes, have a quick look at this. Because of time, we can't look at every reference in the New Testament because how many did I say there were? 35. Good answer. How many times does the devil crop up in just the 4 Gospels? Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, do you reckon? Out of the 35, how many in the Gospels? Answer, 15. Only 15. 15. 9 of those 15 times are about one event alone. So in the Gospels, just one event, and we read about it, Alfie did, a bit earlier, when Jesus was tempted in the wilderness. That's quite amazing. In the 4 Gospels, only all 9 times are to do with one particular event. Okay, we'll look at that event in just a minute. Matthew 13, verse 10 is the next time that the devil's mentioned, and it's when Jesus is telling a parable. Do you think parables are real or symbolic? They're symbolic. Matthew 25, verse 41 is the next time the devil is mentioned, and it's also in relation to a parable. It's symbolic. The next time the devil is mentioned is in Luke chapter 8, verse 12. It's when Jesus is telling a parable. It's symbolic. The next time is in John chapter 6, verse 70, where it says that Judas Iscariot is like a devil. Do you think Judas Iscariot was related to the devil or was the devil? Or do you think he was a human being? Does it sound more symbolic than real? Sort of sounds more symbolic than real. In John chapter 8, verse 44, Jesus said that the Pharisees have got a father and their father is the devil. Do you think the Pharisees actually had a father of the devil, or do you think they had human fathers? I think they had human fathers, so it was symbolic. The only one that sounds more like it's a bit supernatural is in John chapter 13, verse 32, when it says, the devil put into the heart of Judas Iscariot to betray Jesus. That's the only one that sounds sort of supernatural. So out of all of the Gospels, there's only 2 that sound spooky. There's Jesus talking to the devil, and there's the devil going into the heart of Judas Iscariot. So those are the 2. Well, no, actually, we're probably just going to focus on Jesus being tempted in the wilderness because there's 9 times just with that event. Is that okay? Are you all still with me, by the way? Right. So to understand Jesus being tempted by the devil in the wilderness, you've got to go back just before he goes to the wilderness. And what's happening here, by the way? Anybody know? The baptism of Jesus. What happened straight at the point that Jesus was baptized? God gave him something. The Holy Spirit. And what is the Holy Spirit? God's power. I don't know what you would do if suddenly God said to Radman, I'm going to give you my power, right? Thank you. You'd say thank you. You probably would say, oh, thank you. And then you'd think, what? I've got all this power. I can do anything. And that's what happened with Jesus. He had all this power given to him at that point. So what he did, it says in Matthew chapter 4, verse 1, you read this for us, Alfie. Jesus was led by the Spirit, by God himself, into the wilderness to be tempted of the devil. First time ever in the Bible you read about this, by the way. Oh my goodness, Jesus has been led in the Spirit to be tempted of the devil. Right. So he's got all this power and the devil's on the scene. Right. Now, what's the devil? Well, here he is. Look, I don't know what he looks like. And I don't know if Jesus saw him like this, or I don't know what it was, but it basically says in the next verse, when the tempter came to Jesus, he said, if you're the Son of God, command that these stones be made to bread. Now, Jesus had been in the wilderness for how long? 40 days. So he's hungry. So the devil turns up and says to Jesus, with your power, you could turn stone into bread. So that's okay. Sounds like there could be a supernatural creature turning up and saying to Jesus, you could do this. It does sound like that. But what does the devil do next? Well, Alfie read this, Matthew chapter 4, verse 5. The devil took Jesus up into the holy city. Where do you think the holy city is, by the way? Jerusalem. And set him on the top of the pinnacle of the temple and said to him, if you are the Son of God, throw yourself down, for it's written that he, God, will give his angels charge over you, and effectively they'll bear you up and stop you from hurting yourself. Do you think that the devil did take Jesus onto the top of the temple in Jerusalem? You don't think he did? You think Jesus was still in the wilderness? Interesting. So you don't think anybody actually saw Jesus on the top of the temple? Oh, there's Jesus on the top of there. Who's that with him? Fiery monster. Oh, that's strange. Oh, they've gone again. No, it didn't happen like that. It doesn't make. Does this sound like a bit symbolic? Oh, subtitles aren't available. Sorry about that. I don't know what we're going to do about that. Thank you for that advice. Matthew chapter 4, verse 8, the devil does something else. The devil takes Jesus into an exceeding high mountain and showed him, by the way, which is the biggest mountain on planet Earth? Everest, 6 miles high. Do you know, by the way, how far you can see from the top of Everest if all the world was flat, no hills? How far could you see, do you think, from the top of Everest? 220 miles, well, 219 miles, scientists have better than me have calculated. But the devil took him to an exceeding high mountain, didn't show him 220 miles, showed him all the kingdoms of the world and said to him, I'll give you all of this if you fall down and worship me. Do you think Jesus was taken to a physical mountain and showed all the kingdoms of the world? What is happening then? Where is all this taking place? If he hasn't been taken somewhere, where do you think this is all happening? In his mind. All of this is going on in Jesus's mind. Now, the question is, has the devil put it in his mind, or what's going on? And by the way, the devil clears off at the end of that, because in verse 11, it says, the devil left Jesus and angels came and ministered unto Jesus. So Jesus has gone through all this stuff, and probably we weren't told all of it. There was probably more that went on, but the devil then went, and there he is, look, flying off with his horns and fire or whatever else he's got. Do you remember I said that all the things in Revelations were symbolic? And I'm going to show you that the devil is symbolic and why it is symbolic. You see, all this stuff in the Bible, there's tons of it that is symbolic. The devil's one of them, and God has proven that to me in Revelation, that he's just the same as all the rest. The dove, do you think there was a real dove that came down when Jesus was baptized? It doesn't say it was a real dove. It was God's spirit like a dove. Everything's symbolic. Right. But of what? Well, there's a big clue, you know, because do you remember in Matthew chapter 4, after it says that the devil came and tempted Jesus, it says in verse 3, when the tempter came to him. What does that sound like? If I said, the tempter came to me, what do you think it might be? If I said the tempter came to me, what could that be? I was tempted. The devil is to do with temptation. It's symbolic of temptation. You see, our temptations are when we argue that our way is right and God's way is wrong. You see, the word devil literally means a false accuser. The devil means false accuser. And this is how I would explain it. Tell me if you agree with this statement. This is really important to understand. We falsely accuse God of not being right when we're tempted to do wrong. We falsely accuse God of not being right when we are tempted to do wrong. Does that make sense? So in other words, the temptation that Jesus had in his own mind was to turn stone into bread. Why do you think he was tempted to turn stone into bread? Because he was hungry. Did he need the devil to do that? Did he need a supernatural being to do that? Or do you think he was hungry? I think he was hungry. Do you think with the almighty power that he was given, that he might think to himself, I could throw myself off the temple and see if God does rescue me and test God to see whether he saves me? Do you think with almighty power from God that he might have thought, I could take over the world at this point and bypass the horror of crucifixion? Do you think he might have thought that? I think he might have done. Do you think if he thought that he was falsely accusing God in his mind, at that instant in time, he was falsely accusing God, like, I'm going to try and do it my way? But did Jesus do it his way? Or did he say, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do it God's way? Jesus overcame the battle of temptation in his own head. By the way, have any of you ever been tempted to do anything wrong? Do you ever sit there and think, devil's done it again? Blimmin' devil, I wanted to eat that chocolate. He's made me think about eating it. I've thought about it. I shouldn't eat it because I'm on a diet. I've eaten it. Devil's done it again. God, if you'd have removed the devil, I would have been much better, much happier. Or do you think it's our own mind that we're battling with? And the answer is, we can't blame a third party. We can only blame our own mind that is playing. And this is what Jesus was going through. In fact, of course, it says in James chapter 1, verse 14, each person, by the way, that's me and you, is tempted when he is lured and enticed by what? His own desire. Why doesn't it say each person is tempted when he's lured and enticed by the devil? Oh, it doesn't say that. It says it's your problem. It's when you're enticed by your own desire. And when desire's conceived, it brings birth to sin. Did Jesus bring birth to sin? Did he give in to his temptations? He didn't. Did he have temptations? Oh, yes, he did. The devil symbolically was. Now, why doesn't it just say, please, God, why have you done this? Why did you put in the Bible that it's like Jesus talking to a third party? Why couldn't you just say, Jesus thought in his mind? It would have been a lot easier and saved a lot of confusion. It's simply this. God, in his wisdom, decided to personify sin and temptation. That's what it was. He decided to make a symbolic figure of this, as if it was a battle between something, not just in Jesus's mind. Personification happens all the way through the Bible. Wisdom is described as a her and a she and a mother. Do you think wisdom is a real female person? No. It's personification. It's God's way of showing that Jesus was battling against something that was massive, but it was his own temptation when he was falsely accusing God. So going back to it, look, I believe the beast is symbolic, the false prophet is symbolic, the devil is symbolic, and it's symbolic of our temptations. Now, you know this picture in Revelation, this is at the end of time. This is at the end of the kingdom of Christ. This is at the end of the 1,000 years. And the picture that God is painting for us in Revelation chapter 20 is a time when there is no more kingdoms opposing Jesus because the beast has gone, when there is no more false religion because the false religions have gone. There's only Jesus's religion, true Christianity. There is no more devil. In other words, the people that live on earth have got no more temptations. Do you think when we're with Jesus in the kingdom, do you think we will be still tempted? Do you think that means the devil has gone? The devil has gone. And by the way, death has gone, the grave has gone. People don't die anymore. It's God painting a symbolic picture of the future. I've got maybe 60 seconds. I'm doing a short exhortation, so you'll be fine. So look, in the last few seconds, do you know something? Jesus has destroyed the devil anyway. Because it says in Hebrews chapter 2, verse 14, for as much then as the children are partakers of flesh and blood, he, Jesus, also himself likewise took part of the same. In other words, Jesus was human, like Richard and me and Alfie and everybody else in this room are human. He was just like us. That through death, his sacrifice, he might destroy him that has the power of death, that is the devil. Jesus in his death destroyed the power of the devil. And I ask you, right, if the devil is a supernatural being, how does Jesus dying impact a supernatural baddie? If anything, he's looking on saying, well, brilliant. Son of God's dead. I'm happy with that. Thank you very much. Move on to the next one. How does Jesus dying remove the power of the devil? And the answer is it doesn't impact the devil at all. But what if the devil was temptation? Do you think Jesus destroyed the power of his own temptation by dying without sin? Of course he did. Because when he died on the cross, had he ever once given in to the symbolic devil, which is temptation? Did he ever give in to temptation and sin? No. Did he overcome the power of temptation? Yes. Is he the only person that's ever lived to overcome temptation and win? And the answer is yes. He's the only one. Do you know something? We're told what the power of death is. The wages of sin is death. And so therefore, if you go back to that, look, that through death he might destroy him that has got the power of death, that is the devil. We're then told that what makes us die isn't the devil, it's what? Sin. And why do we sin? Because we are human and we are tempted. And the devil is symbolic of temptation and our human nature. So last slide, really. This is it. God tells us that the devil is human nature. I've missed 2 slides out. Sin in the flesh is the devil. The devil is human nature. It's our sinful thoughts. Jesus had sinful thoughts. He just didn't follow them through. He defeated them, every single last one of them. It's our ability to be tempted and to sin. And God has personified it. He has made it look as if it is a battle between something that is supernatural. But it's only like God saying there's a beast. It's only like God saying there's a false prophet. It's only like God saying there's a lake of fire. It's only like God saying there's wisdom that's like a woman. It's only like bread and wine on the table that isn't anything, but it's actually symbolic of Christ's blood and body. It's only like baptism, which is going underwater, which is nothing, but actually it's symbolic. It's all symbolic. Every last bit of it is symbolic. And so really what I'm saying to you is that this is what it's about. It's not a struggle between God and a fallen angel. It's the struggle between God and our own minds that are tempted to go the wrong way. And this is why God can't do anything about it right now, because guess what? Your temptation is a sign of one thing. Anybody know what that is, by the way? When you're tempted, what is really that a sign of? The answer, free will. God has created us that we can go left or we can follow him and go right. And by giving us that ability to be tempted to go left or right, God isn't tempting us, but we have free will. And that's where the battle is. And the battle takes place in our brains, in our hearts, and in our minds, which is why when Judas, it says the devil entered his heart to betray Jesus, it wasn't the real devil saying, hey, Judas, what I want you to do now is chop Jesus in and get him crucified. Do you know what tempted Judas, by the way? What was Judas's downfall? Money. It was cash. The love of money is the root of all evil. And it was Judas that felt it. It was nothing to do with the supernatural baddie. It was his own brain that went wrong. That is why the devil is still working in the world, because we still have temptations right now. That's why Jesus was able to destroy the devil himself in his own personal world. And the wonder of it all is that we ourselves, if we associate ourselves with Jesus, even though we are tempted, can have our sins forgiven when we fail. That, I've gone over 5 minutes. I do apologize, but that is the end, as I see it, of the story.